step to have everybody, participate in this. Barbara?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. You're such a doll. I love you. America has witnessed a miracle.
Yeah.
Let's bow our heads and pray. Father God, creator of the heavens and earth, life giver, sustainer, and lover of our soul, we come humbly before you now and give you high praises. Your word says, blessed is a nation whose God is the Lord. Yet we have been a nation that has turned its back on you. Forgive us. We have been like a ship lost at sea, tossing and turning in a storm. But your people cried out and called on your name, and you answered us. We are eternally grateful for your majestic right arm that extended your scepter of mercy. You have intercepted evil plans and have given us another chance to serve you again. Thank you. We have been supernaturally realigned with your favor and goodness, and you have given us new hope for our future and the future of our children. We thank you for our President Donald Trump and his newly confirmed cabinet that have set their minds to do good for this nation. Bold men and women who have sacrificed already more than we will ever understand. Bless them, God. Protect them, God. Keep evil from their door. Watch over their families. God Almighty, continue to watch over this nation, a friend to Israel. Hold us accountable and keep us humble, for pride comes before a fall. Because our enemies are always looking for a way to devour us, make us vigilant. Make us bold, make us honest, give us courage. Give us hearts to trust in you. Raise up men and women from this community, humble servants, bringing light to the darkness, breaking chains that bind us, and standing from the freedom that comes from you. Thank you for this chance to gather today, for the food that we eat, for the breath that we have. Be with our speakers and all those that have worked hard to make this happen. We give you thanks, and God bless America. Amen.
Amen.
She knew Ronald Reagan personally when he was governor and when he was president, and she served 40 years in the Santa Barbara Women's Club. Yes, at Rockwood. Yeah. Thank you for coming. We're honored to have you today.
And she's having a Bloody Mary, too.
And she's having a Bloody Mary. Our kind of girl. In 2008, she was a state Senate majority leader and the first woman elected to that position. Senator Romero has been a forceful advocate for school choice and educational reform. She was California Director of Democrats for Educational Reform, and she authored California's groundbreaking Romero Open Enrollment Act. This is also known as the Parent Trigger Law.
Take our picture?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everybody. It's such an honor to be with you today. Is this too loud?
Yeah, that's only because I'm sitting right in front of it.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know how to turn it lower.
Oh, I think it's good.
Got it?
Yeah.
I can just take it off and talk loud.
No, you speak so they can all hear. I'm just moving into the corner.
All right. So thank you so very much. It really is such it was such a heartwarming invitation to receive when I got the email from Linda. Steve Frank, a very dear friend of mine and ours, told me that the invitation was going to be coming. And I want to just at the very beginning thank you. I feel emotional because when you make a big change, when you leave what has been your life and you cross the aisle, you never know how you're going to be received. And I will tell you overwhelmingly, from the Republican side of the aisle, it has been nothing but just warmth, invitation, hugs, and I really thank you. from the Democratic side of the aisle, I actually got mixed reviews. Some were saying, you go girl. Others were saying, I've been thinking about it too. And there were others that did the bleep you and all of that stuff. But life goes on, right? And I think it's really interesting when we think about the changes overall because, we've all probably read the classics or heard of the classics, looking at the Iliad, the Odyssey. And it's basically tales of war, of survival, of the Trojan horse and the winning and everything, and then the voyage home. And what happens, the transition, the changes. So it's a bit of an odyssey. It's a journey. And that old adage that it's not the destination, but the journey that's the interesting story. So when I got the invitation, I thought, well, I'll tell you a bit about my journey. And there's probably so much more than what I could share with you today, just given the time limitations. But it has been a bit of a political odyssey. I do, as I was introduced, I was the majority leader of the California State Senate. What that meant was that I was in basically not all, but most of these big meetings, budget, legislation, et cetera. I would be sitting there in terms of thinking about the campaigns, sort of away from the Capitol, but helping to decide on elections, who's going to go where, the candidates, et cetera. I will tell you that when the conversation initially arose between the Democratic candidate Hannah Beth Jackson versus the Republican candidate Abel Maldonado, I did take aside the president of the Senate and said, Abel Maldonado has this. And he became my hermanito. He's my little brother. And I told him, I'm sorry, doesn't matter. A Democrat will not win that seat. So I did have some influence, even as a Democrat back then, for really looking across the aisle and just saying, look, let's go ahead and let's work with Abel Maldonado. And I think for most folks, even though I was considered to be left of center when I first came into the legislature, by the time that I left in 2010, mostly because I advocated for school choice, I began to be called, even back then, a right-wing, Republican-loving, blah, blah, blah. So I can imagine what it's like today. Because that was 2010, when if you stood up for school choice, as I did, and I knew that I was going against the most potent, powerful political player in the state of California, the teachers' unions, to which the Democratic Party is tethered, and I just said, not on my conscience. I cannot do this. I will not do it. I confronted my party back then. I paid the price politically, but I walked out with my conscience intact. And I believe it's the right thing to do. So it's taken a while, but more and more, I believe, even more and more Democrats are beginning to gravitate to school choice. So I was the head of, I was the majority leader. I was a delegate to the Democratic conventions. Believe it or not, way back with Jesse Jackson, yes, a long time ago in 1984, I think, Barack Obama, and before some of you boo Barack Obama, I will say, think about the choices back in whenever it was that he ran, I forget. But it was him or Hillary Clinton. And the National Education Association had already come out saying Hillary was their choice. And there was not going to be any school choice. I did talk with Barack Obama. He had been a senator in Illinois, and the one thing that I really did appreciate about him was that he believed in charter schools. And he was not the education endorsed candidate. And I thought, I'll take that. And actually, I did work over time when I was, the remaining days that I was in the legislature, on some school choice, trying to get performance pay, bonus pay into teacher salaries. So it's just not how many years you breathe on the job in order to get a job and get promoted. So those were a couple of things that I don't think many people know about him, but that I saw in terms of being a Democrat. What were my choices there? So I went that way. Growing up in my household, the names, it was JFK, it was RFK, it was LBJ even, and those were the names that were revered, basically. My parents were products of the Great Depression. And so I grew up in a very blue household. My father was a union member. As a little girl, he used to take me. He worked the railroads. But I remember when he would take me, he would always say, and I always remembered this, he would talk about how the union bosses have nothing in common with the rank and file. And that was way back then. That was his reality of being a railroad worker. And I grew up in Barstow, California, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, hotter than hot. Maybe some of you stopped to put gas in, at some point along the way. I mean, it would get up to 113 degrees. He was wearing the overalls because he had to go under the trains to fix. And these were the stories. He always knew, and I think emphasized to me, it's about the American worker. And I think growing up as a little girl in a blue household, I look back, and even though I think today, I wonder how my parents would think about me changing to become a Republican, I know that the lessons that they had of what it means to be an American worker, it would have meshed with their values. Because the Democratic Party, I say, even though I left, in reality, the party left me. I no longer recognized it. And so I did say goodbye. I said goodbye to the Democratic Party, and I believe more and more, if you look at it, and especially after the last election, there are so many more just like me. I mean, I happen to have been a legislator, so people, it got picked up in the news, but I will guarantee you, I represented a good part of East Los Angeles, San Gabriel Valley, the east side of LA County. That was my district. Many working class, communities. A lot of the neighbors, former neighbors said, count me in too. We are there. And many of the families didn't want to change their name. They didn't want to go from a D to an R. That journey was a bit too far. But they still said, kind of like a speakeasy, like, psst, I'm voting for Donald Trump too. Psst. And so the message would get out. And I'd say, whatever. And I think that's the message ultimately, because I do believe there really isn't a red state, a blue state. I think California's the golden state. Yeah. And it's okay to have whatever label you want behind your name. An NPP, an independent, whatever it is. Because I think more and more, and especially this last election showed it to us, and what's happening in California now, I think further compels us to say, park the candidate, look at the program, look at the platform, what do we want? What do we want to give our kids? And I think more and more people are understanding we want to restore the golden sheen that has been tarnished in California. With the hope of Donald Trump, I think that really we are getting there. But how did this happen overall in terms of making the change? Well, if I go back to it, I told you a little bit about when I was in the legislature, I believed in school choice. I was one of those strange Democrats. People thought I was strange because even back when I first started in the legislature in 1998, I was pro-choice. I was school vouchers even. The teachers union, I think, went crazy when I would talk about vouchers, opportunity scholarships, whatever you wanted to call it. And the reason being was because my mother had a 6th grade level of education. She had to drop out of school in 6th grade to provide for her family. I ended up having a PhD, becoming a university professor, going to the legislature, leading the education committee. And I remember in my household, we could not afford magazine subscriptions, but we had a couple of books, and I remember them. One of them was Little Women, Louisa Alcott. And I would read that over and over, and everybody should read it several times in their lifetime. So bravo. I don't even know how Little Women ended up in our bookshelf, but it was there. Then my family's from New Mexico. I always tell people, my family, I'm Latina, Mexican-American origin, but I always tell people, my family didn't cross the border crossed us. Because once upon a time, it was Mexico and then the U.S. annexed. And so that's how we became part of the United States way back when. And so we had this book of, they were Native American, fables. And because New Mexico, Albuquerque, is very much a very strong indigenous community as well. And so we had a book of Hopi, Navajo fables. And then we had the Bible. And between those 3 books, My mother would read, I would see her reading, she would sit us down to read, and I would read. So those were three very influential texts in my life, from Louisa Alcott to the fables to the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I think reading those, plus many others as it went along the way, really give you a very profound look on, no matter where we come from, how do we value character? How do we value doing the right thing? How do we value, the book of Job, and knowing that there will be hardships, but you overcome, and you ask for grace, and you ask for wisdom, and you ask for forgiveness, and you accept. And so I think that those are great themes in all of those books. So in the legislature, I believe strongly in looking at school choice. I represented East LA, as I said, and I represented the East Side. I don't know if you know much about the East Side schools. If any of you saw the movie Stand and Deliver, if not, please, you can probably find it. This was about a number of East Side schools. True story. And actually, the teacher was a Republican, by the way, okay? And I think if Hollywood would have known it, they probably wouldn't have made the movie, thinking about it now. But this was about a story where basically the school system itself in the district basically just thought, they're just a bunch of little Mexican kids. What do they know? And they'll never learn calculus and advanced mathematics, et cetera. But this teacher said these kids can stand and deliver. And sure enough, it shows how he worked with the kids, and they overcame great odds to really excel and perform, and made national news when they outperformed, and the districts didn't believe them. They made them take the test over again, and voila, the kids scored perfectly well again. But when I was in the university, I began to see that too many, I call them kids, I always call them kids, my students would come into the classroom, and these were the students who had done everything right. They graduated. They got 4.0 or 3.5 GPAs. They went to college. And then they would get into my classrooms, and I began to realize they can't write. They can't read. They had to be enrolled in remedial education in college. Many of them were on college scholarships, and so their scholarship money was going to pay for the remediation that didn't count towards a degree. And so many of them ended up dropping out. It was once presumed it would take 4 years to graduate from college. In California, I began to realize it was taking on average 7 years. That's ridiculous. And so I began to really look at everything and thinking this isn't right. And I realized that much of our problem is that we do not educate in K through 12. And then I began to have run-ins with those who control it, the teachers union. And for purposes of full disclosure, because I was a university professor, it's the law in California, I was a member of all of the teachers unions, NEA, CTA, all of these unions. And so while I was in the legislature advocating on school choice bills in committee, I would have all the lobbyists. I mean, talk about the lobbyists. They had a big core that would be there, and they were all testifying against the bills I was writing. And I thought, oh, those are my union dues at work. They're all testifying against me. I think the worst one was one day when I was in committee, when I was testifying, I was presenting this little tiny bill. It was just saying, look, California, can we find the 10, only 10, there are 10,000 schools in California. There's 1,000 school districts, about 10,000 schools. I only asked for 10. I said, could we identify the 10 lowest chronically, not just 1 year, but chronically, generation after generation, the 10 lowest performing schools, and let's see what we can do to turn them around. Only 10. I remember that day in committee, there was a line of opposition out the door. And so, I'm sitting there looking at the committee members, and you're hearing, no, 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 this is like leading to the demise of the world. And suddenly I heard a voice, because, they line up behind you, and this voice said that they were representing the Los Angeles County Lifeguards Association in opposition to my bill. And I had to turn around like, first of all, I didn't even know the lifeguards had a union, but why are the lifeguards not out saving people from drowning rather than trying to oppose my little bill? That was sort of the epitome for me, like, oh my God, the lifeguards are against a school reform bill. So I began to look at this and just thinking it's not working. And if you look at the statistics, I won't belabor them with you, but looking at even Kamala Harris's hometown, Oakland, California, where only 8% of African American students are proficient in reading. And mathematics. I mean, it's just, how do you become a doctor? How do you become an astronaut? How do you turn around this system? And there's lots of issues overall. I believe in parent responsibility, involvement. That's why I wrote the Parent Trigger Law. It gave power to parents. And then, of course, the unions fought it. And later on, the State Board of Education and the legislature got together to basically say the law can stay on the books, so it's on the books still, but they tinkered with formulas, so basically it becomes obsolete. You cannot use a law because they tinkered into oblivion the formula by which schools would make the list of being chronically underperforming. It's just a game. So you can fight for laws, but then you have to have oversight. And that's where it falls apart with all of those boards. Unelected people, right? That basically sit there and little minions of the governor that who get appointed. So all of that became there. I think, too, as I began to look at it as a woman, I grew up with Helen Reddy. I am woman, hear me roar. And suddenly Title IX is out the door. And we couldn't say woman anymore. We couldn't define what a mother was. And so we began to have a birthing person. And I thought, no. I mean, my family, again, I'm Latina. In my culture, we don't just have one Mother's Day, we have 2 Mother's Days. And I thought, no, I am not going to go say happy birthing person to my mother. She'd probably, if she were alive, she would have thrown me out of the kitchen. Okay, we don't say that. I began to find that my party couldn't define what a woman was. And as a professor, I used to teach. I was a psychologist by training. I joined with the biology. It was a very innovative program where we offered a course on sex and gender. And you can talk about identity, identification, etc. That's okay, but I'm sorry, XX, XY, you do have a combination here and there of different things, but you can define man and woman. It's not that hard. And so I'm very happy with the persistence of Riley Gaines, especially, in getting this turned around. And we should all be grateful to her. I began to also look at this and thinking that the Democratic Party, it just flew over the entire country. Once upon a time, the Democratic Party did stand for blue-collar American workers, a working class. That's gone. It was now, the UC Santa Barbara, and I did do 1 year at Santa Barbara, 1 year before my postdoc. I was here for 1 year, so it's kind of like home for me here in Goleta and Santa Barbara. But it became very much the Democratic Party was the elites, the coastal elites. Martha's Vineyard, which had a heart failure when one plane load of migrants was shipped in, and how quick they were sent out. And I will tell you, as a Latina, there was this idea that the Democratic Party cooked up to say, oh, well, Latinos are going to support the Democratic Party because we're going to open the borders. And we're like, no, that does not define the Latino community. I will tell you, if you look, Latinos are very patriotic. We have a story to tell. I mean, my father did serve in World War II. It was a segregated army. When he returned home, his home originally was in Albuquerque, Belen, Jarales, New Mexico. There were signs on those windows. It was the 1940s, that were very, very awful in terms of the language. But my father never gave up on this country. He believed in this country. He served this country. And when he passed away, taps was played at his funeral, and an American flag draped his coffin. He believed this was the land of opportunity. You respect it. You salute it. You always pay homage to the veterans who have served and given their life. And so those are the values I had. And I thought it is something where citizenship, and again, too, we've got to deal with issues of, again, too, how do we get a sensible immigration system. It is broken. Let's work at it. But you don't bust open the border to basically bring in it was thought Democratic voters. It was replacement theory. That's what it was all about. And so I thought, no, it demeans the idea of citizenship. And I think the Democratic Party was really shocked that Latinos just said, we don't want this. We don't want to just vote, because there's no meaning to being a citizen any longer. And I've known too many new Americans who went through the process, became an American citizen, and are proud of it. So I think we need to look at that. Certainly beforehand, we saw the Democratic Party again too. I mean, Bidenomics, the cost that it waged on all of this was going on that was just terrible. But I think for me, the biggest issue was as we approached the elections. And so I'm fighting all this stuff with, schools, the economy, what do we stand for, the fight over what does it mean to be a woman, etc. All of these things were going on. But the final straw was when, during the primary, which was already rigged, Bobby Kennedy was rigged out of this. And then it was stacked on top of it. And finally, when the Democratic Party just said, after the primary, 14 million Democratic votes, suddenly was just gone. And in Latin America, we call it the dedazo. Again, to the dictator that says, take my finger and I point and I say, using my finger, I'm choosing you, you're going to be the candidate. The people get no choice. It's called the dedazo. That's what was done in this country. It was a coup. It was the most horrendous abuse of democracy, and I was very actively speaking out. I was being called on TV shows to come and talk as a Democrat, and I remember one day one of the producers called me and I said, look, you know what, I'm a Democrat, but maybe you should find a different Democrat because I can't defend this anymore. This is so bad. And they said, no, go ahead and come and you can tell your story. So I kept talking, believe me. But then, when they did that, again, too, about the pulling of everything, that's when I just said, I'm out of here. This is, every Democrat with any sense of decency should not stand for this. This is a complete demolishing of so-called the party of democracy. And I believed in democracy. I had run for office. I know some of you in this room have run for office as well. And what it would mean is in the future, if we ran and we won our primary and then the party leaders or the backroom funders, the donors came and said, oh no, we don't like you, we're going to pick somebody else. There's no more representative democracy. It was big. And Biden was horrible candidate. I mean, terrible. I mean, he should have never run, but he did, of course, in a rigged primary. But when they even did that, that was just beyond any belief, and I said, I'm out of here. And I had seen friends, because I did consider Leo Terrell, Leo 2.0. He had left. He was a Democrat. He had left. Then I saw Tulsi Gabbard. She left. But the one that really brought tears to my eyes was Bobby Kennedy. Yes. And I remember that night when he said, I'm out, I said, I'm gone. I mean, this is like the end of the line, because Kennedy was sacred in my household. And I remember him going, and remember his great entrance with Donald Trump, again, to You're My Hero. Now, in the meantime, I was also watching Donald Trump. And quietly, I would be listening. My daughter, even one time, this is before Rush Limbaugh passed, I remember I was sitting, because things were people were watching me, but even way back then, I was kind of like a closet Republican fan. I was sitting in my car, and I was listening to the end of the Rush Limbaugh show, and I was listening, because if I went outside, they were going to say, oh, why are you listening to Rush? And all of a sudden, my daughter came up. She goes, Mom, busted. You're listening to Rush Limbaugh. But she actually had already left the party. She was libertarian, so she said, come on over, Mom. It's good that you left. So she was there with me. So I was very excited about what I was seeing. And I was thinking, you know what? In politics, you hear everything. People curse and swear, and they do. It's not, you're not in it for morality. I'm sorry. But how do we want to live our life? What values do we have? Can we turn the economy around? Are we respected on the world stage? Will we bring our hostages home? Will we stand up for the Jewish students at UCLA who were chased? And that was horrendous. And I did a couple of postdocs at UCLA. I know where they were they had to run for safety. And you think, no, I went to Auschwitz a few years ago, and the whole purpose of looking at Auschwitz or whichever of the camps was to never forget. And here at UCLA, just miles from where I live today, Jewish students were being threatened and bullied and harassed and having to be escorted, hiding in libraries because they couldn't get through. It was unbelievable. And at that point, Steve Hilton and I actually did go to UCLA and called out the governor, the regents, and everybody to say, shame, this is a California institution. And what part of never forget have we forgotten? Girls, and to me especially the girls. I mean, that could be our daughter. It could be our sister. It could be us. And I saw that and I thought, oh God, not in my name. We've got to stand up. But it was silence from the Democrats. Yeah. And so I think all of these things were so important to me. So kind of going forward, I thought, we have grown up really seeing so much. I remember maybe some of you in this room huddled around the TV screen, mine was black and white, watching us go to the moon. Yeah. And the excitement, everybody watching and thinking, we were Americans. We weren't Democrat, Republican. We were Americans watching America get to the moon. And so much has happened since. And yes, we've had setbacks. Yes, we've had disappointments. Yes, there are politicians that we don't like and that we think, et cetera, et cetera. But I believe that ultimately this is a land of opportunity, that the values are there, that we as the American people want an America first, and we are ready to set aside our label and to say, I'm going to vote for the person, no matter if it's a D or an R, an I, whatever it is, but the one that will make a brighter future for our children and our grandchildren, because I think that's what it's about. So I declared, I remember the sun was rising, I went online and I said, I'm re-registering, and it was a big moment for me. And I said, I didn't leave the party left me. It doesn't exist anymore. And like my friend Leo and the others that I have appreciated, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, once upon a time. There's a lot of, folks who are ready to come over. And I think that California's sheen can be restored if we open up the tent, invite people to work with us in search of a common good. To me, it begins with schools and choice and parent rights. Yes. But there's so much we can do together. So I'll stop there because I think you might have some, questions or comments, but I'll stop there. But thank you, because it means so much to me to just have the heartfelt warmth to say welcome to the Republican Party led by Donald J. Trump. Because I will say, if it wasn't Donald J. Trump, I might not have joined, but I was inspired by the blue-collar billionaire who I believe, had my father been alive today, would have said, that's our guy. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you. So comments, questions, whatever. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, all right. Yes, sir.
So I have a question. In your opinion, what do you foresee coming between the state of California and the present administration in Washington? What do you see happening going forward from sort of an inside state? Is that kind of a good kind of what I'm trying to ask here?
Sure.
Who's going to win this one?
Well, ultimately, it's up to the people. And we saw that vote, almost 40%, basically shifting. So many counties that shifted over. Mostly Republican, but independent and Democrats as well, who stayed Democrats. Build on that, but it means party registration, quality candidates, etc. But look what we're dealing with. I believe we're dealing with the worst governor in the state, in the nation. I mean, it is the worst governor. And potentially, God forbid, the failed vice president, there's a lot of rumors that she may be running for governor again. So it's going to be up to us. It's up to the people ultimately. But we are faced against very powerful, the propaganda machines. We're learning with the DOGE, thank God for DOGE, looking at all the money, U.S. aid going to AP and Politico and Reuters. And it's incredible what we're learning about this. And so I think that we've got to challenge it. This Trump proofing is unbelievable. And I hope and I wish that President Trump will say no, that strings means accountability. You are not going to get money for the reconstruction of California if you don't abide by the federal laws. And I will say, I now live in Malibu. I lived on the east side, Barstow, California, then I moved to the east side, and then I felt like George Jefferson, like going from the east side, I went to the west side. I thought, I'm on the west side. And so I was in Venice, and then I moved up to Malibu. I will tell you, and again, too, no disrespect to what was happening in the nation, but in California, Malibu, fires, rains, mudslides. Last night I heard the frogs croaking. There were earthquakes, 2 of them in Malibu, early morning. When I go home, I'm wondering if the locusts are going to descend on us tonight. But we're surviving, we're changing, and so I think it's up to us to see what we can do. It's our California. It's there if we take it, but I think we want to be reasonable. I think we want to be rational. I believe more and more as we find today that, 31% think positively of the Democratic Party? This was the brand of the Kennedys. It's 31% today, and I think people are seeing it doesn't represent me anymore. It's gone. It's AOC now, and even worse, there are some representatives, believe it or not, who are worse than AOC. So I think it's up to us, but we've got to confront the money, and I think we have to hold Newsom accountable. Some people have said, should we recall him? My feeling, honestly, is you just give him a vehicle to raise money. So why do that? The election's next year. But I think if the Republicans are to win, if we're going to win, we have to get a unity ticket. You can't have 2 or 3 Republicans. So it's kind of top of the ticket. And I think we've got to figure out, okay, guys, get together. Come up with some decision. Folks have urged, and I'm so thankful. A lot of people say, Gloria, why don't you run for office? I'm thankful for just the acceptance, because I kind of say, look, I'm a newbie here. But I've said at the top of the ticket, there are some very credible people that are talking about this who can do the fundraising, who have that donorship. But if you get even 2 or 3, I'll guarantee you're going to end up with the lieutenant governor, whoever that is. Nobody knows what she does. The AG or somebody, or Katie Porter, or the former mayor of LA. That's who we're going to get in a jungle primary. Yes.
Ancient times, I'm the archivist of California Republican history. Ronald Reagan, George Deukmejian, and a slate in 1966 defeated an incumbent governor, Emmett G. Brown. Are you considering putting together the same kind of slate? And if so, we have a friend, Eric Ehrlich, who could be Attorney General of this state.
Well, again, too, a number of folks are talking. Believe me, there's been conversations. Our dear friend Steve Hilton, Carl DeMaio, who really is just a powerhouse in San Diego County, Rick Grinnell as well. A number of people that are talking, looking. There's a very powerful sheriff in Riverside County. Again, too, I don't know him personally, but I've heard very good things about him. But the issue is exactly that idea. Could a slate be put together? Because remember, in California, it's now the jungle primary. So that's coming to. That's why I kind of wore this today. I thought, okay. When you're going to battle, you kind of feel like you're going to be in the jungle. And so, but we've got to be smart, unite. And I know people have to have a chance, think about it, etc. But maybe you can have like the little mini conversation. Do all this. Invite people. Come and talk to people. There is talent there. But the idea of a slate where you put this together and then you say, because you bring up kind of like that you make all boats rise. You really draw it, and it benefits down-ticket races as well, from the Senate to the Assembly, local school boards. And that's where I have really worked in the last few years, trying to get school board members elected, because I really, schools are still my greatest passion and choice. Yes, Christy.
Gloria, I really appreciate how you frame it as the party left you, you didn't leave the party. And I think it's really important to say that, because people get caught in it and then they think that they're stuck, and they're not stuck. And so I appreciate you putting it that way, because I think it helps people, if they want to change. And I've been in the schools for 20 years here in Santa Barbara, and I've come up against the teachers union and all kinds of craziness in my fight, and I've run for school board 3 or 4 different times, and maybe we'll run in 2026. But what do you think about Trump defunding the Department of Education? I mean, we know it's the biggest money laundering scam in California and probably in the nation. And so I know that there has to be funding for education, and we need the kids to actually be learning, which is what they're not doing right now. They're learning things they shouldn't be learning, and they're not learning to read and do math and all that. So what do you think about how that would affect, and what would it look like? Would we come up with something new?
Okay, a couple of months ago, I did write an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. They did accept it, so you can go back, Google it. This was probably about a month and a half ago. And I said, abolish the Department of Education. But let's take a look at it, though. One thing is abolition, because basically all the Department of Education does is it's a middleman. It really is, it's like a broker. You're going there, the taxation, the policy goes to this it's a huge department. And what they do is they figure out formulas to send to each of the states. Education is a state function. So education should go back to the states and then to the locals. The Department of Education, it was set up under Jimmy Carter, and this was a giveaway to the teachers union. Anything in education, believe me, the very powerful education, the teachers union is behind it. Always look for that. There's, it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Open the curtains, there's Randy Weingarten and the teachers union, right there, every single time. So what this would do, the abolition would say, we're going to abolish the middleman. We can figure out the formulas, whatever they are. Maybe you have to have some semblance of folks. Some can be in Treasury for student loans. Others can be under, like, for example, the Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Justice for special ed and enforcing the rights of special ed students. I mean, there's a number of things where you can disperse, but you don't need to have a building there with thousands of employees. And what you do then is you take the form and you just send it to the states. Okay, but the work can't stop there. Let's say that the abolition of the Department ensures. What it means then, and what I've seen, is this now puts the pressure on Sacramento. And that's why the governorship, the State Board of Education, the lieutenant governor, all of these seats become that much more important, because now, under a state system, this new slate would be figuring out how to disperse the funds and having accountability. When I was in the legislature, the students who are the most vulnerable are our special education students. The most vulnerable. And federal monies come largely to deal with especially low poverty special ed students. Gets into Sacramento coffers. Then what Sacramento says is, oh, golly gee, we don't get enough money. They kind of say we blame it on Washington. What this would mean is no more blaming on Washington. Here it is, Sacramento. It's your responsibility. These are your funds. And now Sacramento will have to show its values, because all a budget is a statement of values. And if we put money into educating special ed students or fair distribution in terms of looking at how do we close these chronically failing schools, shut them down, turn them into charters, homeschool, whichever, I believe in vouchers, educational opportunity scholarships, so that parents can choose, I want to go over here or I want to go there. Religious instruction as well. I believe in it all. But it now means that Sacramento won't have excuses anymore. And I think if we can get that, that's worth it. So abolish it. And please go to the Wall Street Journal. You can read my article.
Gloria, I'm familiar with your name. You've been in politics for a long, long time, in state level anyway. But I also...
The mass, the fake news, the media, it doesn't talk about the worst of the worst. It just says as though they're coming to take your abuelita away. And we've got to counter that. Yes. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, one last question, if there is one.
Steve?
Gloria would like to get on the road pretty soon.
Okay, and this is just an announcement. Yeah, yesterday I heard on Fox News, and I saw Rick Renell, and he said if she runs, he's going to run.
So let me say, I adore Rick Grinnell. Absolutely, to me, I call him, he's our Captain America. He's got the kindest heart, the biggest heart. I hope it's not considered sexist, but he is so handsome. The nicest, he's got the most amazing story.
Yes.
And he's a diplomat.
Yes.
An ambassador, a national intelligence. Remember when he went to Venezuela and he said, like, basically, I'm here from President, I'm here to bring you home. Yes. As somebody who is just, I've known him for years, and I consider myself to be his friend. Yeah. I've known Steve Hilton as well. Wonderful, again, too, very strong. I mean, just adore him. But here's where, again, too, I say, I think there are riches within the Republican Party. There are strong candidates. My hope is that at that level, they will get together and talk. Yeah. Because if we have a Rick Grinnell, oh my God, hallelujah. I believe we can win so much. I actually think Rick might have I don't want to say easy, because nothing's easier, but maybe a straighter way to Sacramento. Steve is an amazing person. And again, too, I think he tells the story. He's an immigrant. So he tells the immigrant story of a golden California. And he has done so much work. And again, too, he's funny, and he's got the biggest heart. And he's been working at this. He's been writing, etc. So he is amazing as well. And then, of course, there's the sheriff. I don't know the sheriff, but again, to a very strong track record. But whatever may happen, I think there are strong candidates. My hope is that they will get together. They are at that level where they can command the donors. They command a national, political support. But if they end up running against each other, I think we just end up with, Katie Porter and Eleni, whatever her name is. So Rick has teased that about, whether it's Kamala Harris. Now, if Kamala Harris, and if she runs, I think we saw the poll, it's something like 57% of Democrats. I think, are you guys crazy? But I think there's enough of us that can say we don't want her ruining the Golden State any further. So keep hope alive. But if you know them, talk to them. Because, like I said, I love and adore Rick. I love and admire, again, to Steve. We have good choices, but let's hope that they can have a meeting and develop some kind of a slate so you can say, this is like a good slate for Cal. Let's make this state golden again. And I think we can do it if we all unite. A unity ticket.